Shalom. I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you the politics of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The Bible tells us that during the tribulation, a major event will take place on the Temple Mount known as the Abomination of Desolation. Then, in Revelation chapter 11, we are told that the ministry of the two witnesses who prophesy for 1,260 days, that they prophesy from the Temple Mount. We are also told that during the tribulation that there will be an altar that is built on the Temple Mount, and that the false Messiah will demand the shutting down of that altar. Therefore, the Temple Mount plays a prominent role in major events of the tribulation. So what is the current situation with the Temple Mount today? What is the viewpoint of Islam regarding the Temple Mount? What's the viewpoint of Orthodox Judaism regarding the Temple Mount? And from the way things are today, how might things develop wherein we can see these prophecies being fulfilled during the tribulation regarding there being a lot of prophetic events and a lot of controversy surrounding the Temple Mount itself. So I'm going to be sharing with you from an article that appeared in the Jerusalem Post entitled, "Who May Go Up to the Mountain of God?" And this article explains very well the politics that surround the Temple Mount, in particular the Orthodox Jewish politics of the Temple Mount. The article reads as follows. As points of religious contention go, the current status of the Temple Mount is one of the most potentially explosive issues for competing faiths anywhere in the world. For Jews, the Temple Mount is the holiest place on earth. And this is where, according to Jewish teaching, the world was created. It is the site of the binding of Isaac and the location of the first and second temples. For Muslims, too, the Temple Mount has become a crucial place of worship and pilgrimage, where there stands a monumental shrine known as the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, a site of great importance in Islam. This reality, combined with the Temple Mount's physical location at the heart of contested territory, has given it a unique geopolitical combustibility not to be found anywhere else in the world. Interreligious and political concerns aside, there is another less prominent but nevertheless bitter dispute currently being waged, and this one is between different Orthodox Jewish groups regarding the permissibility of going up to the Temple Mount. The divisions among different rabbinical leaders are sharp. Some outlaw ascent to the Temple Mount in absolute terms, and by going up to the Temple Mount, they say that there should be spiritual excommunication. Others, however, see the refusal to go up and insist on the Jewish right to pray at the site as a deviation from Torah law. And although access for Jewish Israelis and foreign tourists is currently subject to tightly restricted, time-limited slots, this has not impeded the prosecution of a tough war of words and a struggle over the contested battleground of what is and what is not permitted according to Jewish law. Following Israel's conquest of East Jerusalem in 1967, the Israeli government allowed a Jordanian Islamic Waqf, which is a religious trust which had traditionally administered the Temple Mount complex, to continue to do so, despite the historical and religious importance of the site in Judaism. Additionally, current Israeli law stipulates that Jews and other non-Muslims may not pray on the Temple Mount because of the tensions that this may cause, and supervisors from the walk follow visiting groups to ensure that they do not pray or conduct any visible form of worship. But despite these restrictions, there is a small committed contingent of devout Jews who visit the Temple Mount regularly, deny that doing so is not permissible under Jewish law, and campaign actively for Jews to visit in greater numbers. It is a widely held belief that Jews today are forbidden from going to the site of the temple because of ritual impurity caused by contact with the dead. Should someone contract this status, and it is hard to avoid, Jewish law prohibits entry to certain parts of the Temple Mount on pain of spiritual excommunication. The religious establishment, principally the chief rabbinate, is keen to reinforce this notion. In April, for the second time in 2 months, the chief rabbinate issued a notice reiterating the stance of chief rabbis Shlomo Amar and Yonah Metzger, as well as numerous other senior rabbinical figures such as Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, that it is completely forbidden according to Jewish law to visit the Temple Mount. But for many others, the ban is an affront to their religious sensibilities. Rabbi Chaim Richman of the Temple Institute is one such person who fervently and passionately believes not only in the permissibility of ascending to the Temple Mount, but that there is an obligation to do so and to also pray there. This is the holiest place in the world and the only true holy site in Judaism, Richman told the Jerusalem Post. We have a natural, healthy desire to be seen by God on the Temple Mount, and there is something very, very wrong with rabbis who want to cauterize the natural wellspring of feeling and dedication Jews have for this place. Politicians from the Israeli right are also eager to assert Jewish rights to and sovereignty over the Temple Mount. National Union Knesset members Ari Eldad and Yuri Ariel visited the Temple Mount in December, and the Likud Knesset member Danny Danon also has visited the Temple Mount in recent times, who is another advocate of Jewish rights at the site. The time has come for the government to exercise its sovereignty over the holiest spot in the Jewish religion, Ariel said after his recent visit. According to Richman and other notable rabbis, both past and present, concerns about stepping in the wrong place on the Temple Mount are unfounded. Maimonides, for example, is known to have gone up to the Temple Mount in 1166 during a pilgrimage he made from Egypt to Israel. He wrote a brief letter about his experience, vowing to commemorate the date, which was the 6th of the Jewish month of Heshvan, as a special holiday. Moshe Feinstein as well, one of the most respected arbiters of Jewish law in the last 60 years, wrote of an established tradition from the earliest sages that it is permitted to visit the Temple Mount. There are also various historical sources that illustrate how Jews were accustomed to go up to the Temple Mount following the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans in the year 70. One of the most famous such sources is a recounting in the Talmud of a story that occurred after the destruction, when several of the most prominent sages of the time, including Rabbi Akiva, went up to the Temple Mount. All of them began to cry over the ruins. The Talmud relates when they saw a fox running over the Holy of Holies. But Rabbi Akiva laughed, seeing in the experience the fulfillment of one prophecy and thereby expecting the future of fulfillment of the temple's restoration. Other historical accounts also testify to Jews visiting the site and even the presence of a synagogue in the early Muslim era until the 11th century. So, if the historic evidence is so compelling, why is the rabbinate so adamant that Jews must not visit the Temple Mount? The rabbi of the Western Wall complex, Shmuel Rabinovich, who has endorsed the ban on visiting the site, says that despite the opinions and historical evidence cited by those in favor, many of today's leading and most authoritative Torah scholars nevertheless continue to prohibit such activity. He told the Post that Rabbi Yosef Shalom El Yeshiv, the most respected authority on Jewish law today, personally spoke with him about the importance of doing everything possible to prevent Jews from setting foot on the site. Rabinovich continued, proceeding to reel off a long list of other prominent scholars, all banning Jews from visiting the Temple Mount. Outside of a religious desire to visit and pray on the Temple Mount is another driving factor for those who are so insistent on Jewish access to the site. Knesset member Ari Eldad of the National Union sees not only religious significance in the Temple Mount, but cultural and political importance as well. The failure of Jews to maintain their connection with the place, he says, undermines Israel's political claim to it as well. In addition, he continues, it bolsters Muslim and Arab claims to the site and denials that any Jewish temple ever stood there. There is most definitely a political struggle going on, says Eldad. The Arabs think that if they can succeed in prizing away this piece of property from the Jews, then they will be able to seize every other Jewish property here, whether it's territorial, historical, cultural, or religious. There is also something messianic in the efforts of those who ardently seek to restore a Jewish presence on the Temple Mount. The Temple Institute has devoted huge sums of money into constructing and producing the vessels, implements, and garments required for the temple using the exact instructions set out in the Torah. Rabbi Richman and the Institute insist that the temple will not descend from the heavens, as some believe, but it will be constructed by men here on earth, as evidenced by the efforts to reconstruct the temple vessels. Asked if it's the time to rebuild the temple, he responds, we're 2,000 years late in doing so. Other groups, such as the Temple Mount Faithful, led by Gershon Solomon, are clearer about their ultimate goals. This organization says unashamedly that its goals include the building of the third temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem in our lifetime in accordance with the Word of God and all the Hebrew prophets, as well as the liberation of the Temple Mount from Arab occupation. Although it's generally wrapped in technical objections of a political or Jewish religious law nature, the subtext is that rebuilding the temple is beyond the ability of human hands and efforts and must await the arrival of the Messiah. Regardless of the long-term aspirations of the various groups, the current debate surrounding whether or not Jews can and should visit and pray on the Temple Mount will continue because of the activities of organizations like the Temple Institute. But the political and spiritual desire among some who want to insist on their right to pray at Judaism's holiest site is still very much alive. The nature of that desire highlights both the very deep-seated Jewish attachment to this revered place and the huge potential it has to spark intra-religious dispute along with political conflict. Therefore, from this article, we can see how complicated the issue of the Temple Mount is and how there is a struggle going on between Islam and Judaism in particular regarding access and to whom the Temple Mount belongs and who is going to control it. There is even differences of opinion within Orthodox Judaism regarding whether it is permissible to go up on the Temple Mount and pray or whether it is not. Ultimately, the controversy surrounding the Temple Mount is a central thing in the days of the tribulation because it is there that the abomination of desolation takes place. It is there we have the ministry of the two witnesses, and it is there where we have an altar being constructed, and the false Messiah demands that that altar be taken down. Therefore, there is a great spiritual battle over the Temple Mount, and that battle will only be resolved with the coming of the Messiah, even Yeshua HaMashiach. It is the Messiah who will rebuild the temple, and the temple is the place of his throne. Ezekiel chapter 43 and verse 7. Until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.